Opening the conversation that ended 3 hours ago. It is 11 at night. The conversation ended at 8. A short, ordinary exchange with a colleague, a sentence you said, a pause that followed, a look you could not quite read. You have now been through it 400 times. You have rewritten your line. You have analyzed the pause. You have decided the look meant one thing, then another, then the first thing again. None of it changes the conversation, which is over. But your mind is still in the room, still talking, still trying to resolve something that was never unresolved in the first place. This is not thinking. This is replaying. There is a difference, and almost nobody names it. Thinking moves towards something, a decision, an understanding, a next step. Replaying stays in one place, turning the same moment under the light again and again, as if more looking will finally make it make sense. It does not, because the sense was never in the moment. It was in the part of you that could not let the moment end. If you are listening to this, you have lived inside this loop more times than you could count. The text message read until it loses meaning. The decision made and then unmade in your head. The future scenario built in full detail, complete with a reaction you do not yet have a reason to have. The mind, useful and bright and tireless, aimed at a problem it cannot solve because the problem is not actually a problem. It is a feeling wearing the costume of a question. The promise of this audiobook is not that you will learn to think less. That would be a lie, and a useless one. The promise is that you will learn to tell the difference between thought that is going somewhere and thought that is only going in circles. Between the question worth answering and the question you keep asking because asking feels like progress. Between your mind doing its job and your mind performing a routine it learned long ago and never updated. We will build a method for this. It is called the clear method, and it is simple enough to use at midnight, which is exactly when you will need it. Catch the loop. Label the real question. Extract what you actually know. Act on what you can control. Release what has no next move. 5 moves, and none of them require you to become a calmer person first. They only require you to notice, which is a skill, and skills can be learned at any age on any night. Before we begin, one honest thing. This is not therapy, and it does not pretend to be. If your mind is loud because of something heavier than habit, grief that will not lift, fear that restricts your life, thoughts that frighten you, the tools here can sit beside professional help, but they are not a replacement for it. Reaching for that help is its own kind of clarity, not a failure of it. What follows is for the everyday overthinker, competent, caring, exhausted by their own brain. The one who thinks more than anyone they know and suspects correctly that some of that thinking is the problem. Let's begin where the loop begins, with the moment thinking stops helping, and nobody notices the exact second it happened. Chapter 1. When thinking stops helping. Thinking is one of the best tools you own. It got you through school, through hard conversations, through decisions that mattered. The trouble starts when a tool that is good at one job gets used for every job, including the ones it cannot do. A microscope is wonderful for cells and useless for a sunset. Use it on the sunset and you will see nothing but blur and blame the sunset. Productive thinking has a shape. It starts with something uncertain, moves through examination and arrives somewhere. A conclusion, a plan, a question you can act on, or the honest admission that you do not yet have enough information. It is a line. It goes somewhere. Unproductive thinking has a different shape. It starts with something uncertain and circles it. It returns to the start having added detail but not resolution. It feels like progress because motion feels like progress, but the motion is a circle, and circles do not arrive. You can run them for hours and end where you began, more tired and no clearer. The cost is not only time. Every loop trains the brain that this is what you do with uncertainty. Spin. The more you spin, the more the brain reaches for spinning the next time because spinning is now the habit, and habit is what the brain reaches for first. You are not weak for overthinking. You are practiced at it. Recognizing the difference is the whole game, not stopping thought, distinguishing it. A thought that produces a decision is doing its job. A thought that produces only another thought, identical in shape, is not. The first you keep. The second you learn to notice, and noticing is where this book lives. There is a quiet relief in this distinction. You are not trying to shut down a brilliant mind. You are trying to point it. The mind is not the enemy. An unpointed mind is just a powerful tool swinging in the wind, and you have been standing too close to where it swings. Chapter 2. The Loop You Don't Notice. Most people imagine overthinking as obvious, pacing, visibly agitated muttering. The real version is almost silent. You are sitting still. Your face is calm. A stranger would say you look fine. Inside, a loop has been running for 40 minutes, and you did not choose to start it and do not know how to stop it. The loop has a typical structure. A trigger arrives, a memory, a notification, a stray worry. The mind asks a question about it. Did I handle that right? What if it goes badly? Why did they say it that way? The question feels urgent. The mind searches for an answer, but the answer, if found, does not close the loop. It produces a new question. So the loop continues, each turn feeling necessary, none of them ending anything. What makes it invisible is that each turn feels like a new thought, not a repeat. It isn't. It is the same worry in a slightly different coat. The brain is excellent at presenting the familiar as if it were fresh, which is why you can worry about the same thing all evening and believe, honestly, that you are working it out rather than wearing it out. The first skill before any method is simply noticing that you are in a loop, not fixing it, not analyzing why, just naming it. I am in the loop. That sentence, said internally without drama, does something useful. It moves you from inside the loop to outside it. You become the person observing the loop, and the loop, which depended on your total participation, loses a little of its grip. Practice this today with something small. A song stuck in your head is a loop. A minor annoyance replayed is a loop. When you catch one, do not push it away. Just note it. The goal is not silence. The goal is awareness, because you cannot work with a loop you cannot see. Chapter 3. Why your mind keeps asking what if. The what if question feels like planning, and sometimes it is. But in overthinking, what if usually isn't a question seeking an answer. It is a feeling seeking a guarantee, and guarantees are not available for the future, which is why the question never lands. Your mind asks, what if, because its oldest job is to keep you safe? A brain that imagines threats survives. A brain that assumes the best gets eaten. So the mind scans for what could go wrong, and in a safe modern life where literal threats are rare, it scans anyway, at conversations, at careers, at text messages, because the scanner does not know the difference between a predator and a delayed reply. The problem is that what if has no natural stopping point. For any scenario you imagine, 10 more are possible. You can what if your way from a small worry to a complete catastrophe in minutes, and the catastrophe feels urgent even though it is a story you are telling yourself. The feeling of urgency is real. The catastrophe usually is not. Useful what if asks a question with an answer you can use. What if it rains, then I'll bring a coat? That closes. Unuseful what if asks a question with no answer you currently hold. What if I made a mistake that ruins everything? Then I'll think about it more. That only opens another door. The reset here is to ask of any what if. Can I do anything with the answer right now? If yes, it is planning. If no, it is a loop wearing the clothes of planning, and you can set it down without having solved a problem that was never solvable in this moment. Chapter 4. Facts, Stories, and Predictions. Most overthinking is built on a confusion between three very different things. What happened, what story you told about it, and what you predict will happen next. They feel like one continuous truth, but pulling them apart is one of the most relieving things you can do. Facts are small and stubborn. She did not reply for 6 hours. That is a fact. It is also almost the only fact. Everything else, she is angry, she regrets the conversation, something is wrong, is a story. A story is not a lie. It is an interpretation, a guess about meaning, and guesses are allowed to be wrong. The mind presents the story as if it were the fact, and that is where the loop gets its fuel. Predictions are the third layer. Based on the story you forecast, this means the friendship is changing, the job is at risk, the silence will continue. Predictions are not facts either. They are probabilities wearing the mask of certainty. Some predictions are reasonable. Many are the story's anxious child, born of the same assumptions. A simple practice. When a loop is running, write down, even mentally, the fact alone, just the fact. Then notice how much of your distress comes from the story and the prediction layered on top of it. Often the fact is boring. The 6-hour silence is boring. The drama is the story. Seeing that does not erase the feeling, but it shrinks the thing you are actually afraid of, which was never the silence. This is not about denying your reactions. It is about knowing what you are reacting to. You can be hurt by a story and still recognize it as a story. That recognition is the difference between being ruled by the story and simply holding it. Chapter 5. The Conversation Replay. Of all the loops, the replay is the most common and the most quietly punishing. A conversation ends. Minutes later, you are back in it. You hear your own sentence again. You wince. You imagine saying it better. You analyze the other person's face for signs you misread. The conversation is over, but you are still performing it alone for an audience of one. The replay feels productive because it feels like correction. If I understand exactly what went wrong, I won't do it again. Sometimes that is true. A genuine review of a real mistake is useful and brief. But the loop is not review. Review ends. The loop returns to the same wince, the same imagined better line, the same uncertainty about a face you cannot actually re-examine. What the replay is really doing is trying to change the past, which is the one thing thinking cannot do. No amount of replay edits the conversation. It only adds a second event, the private, exhausting reliving on top of the first. You are charged twice for one moment. The clear move here is release, but you earn it. Catch the replay. Label the real question. Usually it is not what did I do wrong, but can I tolerate having handled that imperfectly? Extract the fact. The conversation happened, it is over. Act if there is anything to act on: a brief apology, a follow-up sentence, and if there is, do it once briefly and let that be the answer. Then release, because the past has no next move. You cannot attend to a moment that has ended. Letting it end in your mind is the only correction available, and it is enough. Chapter 6. The Need to Know What Other People Think. A large share of overthinking is spent inside other people's heads. What did they mean? What do they think of me? Did I seem off? The mind builds entire interiors for people and furnishes them with opinions you have no access to, then reacts to the furniture. You cannot know what someone thinks most of the time, and you especially cannot know it by thinking harder. Yet the mind treats the unknown as a problem to be solved by speculation, and speculation produces a story that feels like insight. It isn't. It is a guess given the emotional weight of a fact. This need often hides a deeper question: am I acceptable? The loop about what they think is usually a loop about whether you are safe in their regard. Naming that helps. The real question is rarely what do they think, but can I be okay not knowing? Most of the time you can. Their thoughts are theirs. Your job is your behavior, which you can actually influence. A useful reset. When you catch yourself constructing someone's inner life, ask what you would do if you simply never found out. Usually the answer is that you would go on with your day, which means you can go on with your day now, without the answer. The need to know is often a habit of mental comfort, not a genuine requirement, and comfort is not the same as clarity. Chapter 7. Decision Paralysis. Some overthinking wears the respectable costume of carefulness. You have two good options and you cannot choose, because choosing means closing the door on the other, and the other might have been better. So you examine, and examine, and the examination produces not clarity but fatigue, and the fatigue feels like a reason to keep examining. This is decision paralysis, and it is fueled by a hidden belief that the right choice should be certain before you make it. Life rarely offers that. Most real decisions are made under incomplete information, and the information you are waiting for often only arrives after you choose. You are waiting for a light that turns on once you have already crossed the road. The cost of not choosing is a choice itself, usually the worst one, because it is made by default and carries the weight of all the alternatives you never released. The unmade decision sits in the background, draining attention from everything else, because an open loop is a loop the mind keeps returning to. The reset is to decide with what you know, accept that some regret is possible, and close the loop. A reasonable decision made now beats a perfect one made never. Often the two options were both fine, and the only real problem was the refusal to leave one of them behind. Releasing the unchosen path is a skill. It feels like loss until you practice it, and then it feels like relief. Chapter 8. The Fear of Making the Wrong Choice. Under decision paralysis sits a specific fear that you will choose wrong, and the wrong choice will be visible, costly, and proof of something bad about you. This fear turns ordinary decisions into tests you are sure to fail, and so you avoid taking them. Wrong choices are real and some matter, but the fear usually overestimates both the likelihood and the consequences. The mind builds a catastrophe from a minor uncertainty, then treats the catastrophe as the likely outcome, then calls the resulting terror caution. It isn't caution. It is a story about your own incompetence, repeated until it feels true. Most choices are recoverable. A job taken can be left. A word said can be clarified. A path chosen can be adjusted. The truly irreversible decisions are rare, and even many of those allow correction at the edges. The fear talks as if every choice is permanent and every error is fatal, which is almost never the case. The useful question is not, what if I'm wrong, but if I'm wrong, what will I do then? Answering that turns a formless dread into a practical plan, and plans are less frightening than dreads. You may still choose imperfectly. That is allowed. A life is built from imperfect choices handled reasonably, not from perfect choices made in terror of imperfection. Chapter 9. The Control Illusion. A great deal of overthinking is aimed at things you cannot control: other people's reactions, the future, outcomes, whether someone replies, whether a plan holds. The mind behaves as if thinking hard enough about these will give it a lever, and it mistakes the feeling of engagement for the presence of control. You have far less control than the loop implies, and far more than it admits in the moments it matters. You control your actions, your words, your attention, your boundaries. You do not control results, reactions, or the past. Most loops blur these, spending hours on the column you cannot touch while ignoring the column where your hands actually are. The control illusion is exhausting because it sends you to move a wall. No effort moves it. Then you try harder, certain that more thinking will finally find the switch. It won't, because there is no switch on that wall. The switch is on a different wall entirely, the one labeled what I can do, and the loop has its back to it. Practicing the distinction is the work. When a loop runs, ask, is there an action available to me right now, however small? If yes, the loop becomes a task. If no, the loop is a story about a wall and you can stop pushing it. Recognizing the difference does not make the uncertainty vanish, but it stops you from burning the only resource you have, your attention, against something that will not move. Chapter 10. Overthinking Relationships. Relationships are the richest source of loops because they involve other minds, which are unknowable, and feelings, which are loud. A partner is quiet, and you build a narrative of distance. A friend's tone seems off, and you reconstruct the friendship's entire history to explain it. The people you love become problems to be solved by analysis. An analysis of a feeling person never lands. The trap is treating a relationship like a puzzle with a correct solution. It isn't. It is a living thing made of two uncertain people doing their best. The loop asks, what is really going on with us? As if there were a hidden fact to uncover, when the only honest answer is, I don't fully know, and neither does the other person, and that's normal. What helps is action in the relationship rather than analysis about it. Instead of constructing the narrative, you ask. Instead of replaying their tone, you say gently that something felt off. The loop prefers the private reconstruction because the private reconstruction is safe, no risk, no vulnerability. But safety is exactly why it doesn't resolve anything. Real clarity in relationships comes through small, brave, imperfect conversations, not through solitary thought. Worth saying plainly, some relationships are genuinely difficult, and some silence means something. The reset is not to stop caring. It is to move from endless internal rehearsal to one honest external step, and then let the answer come from the actual person rather than the version of them you built in your head. Chapter 11. The message you read 10 different ways. The short text message is perhaps the perfect engine for overthinking because it contains almost no information and invites almost infinite interpretation. Okay, sure. We should talk. 3 words and your mind builds 3 worlds. A message is a fact. A few words were sent. Everything else, the tone, the mood, the implied meaning, is invented because tone cannot travel through text and the sender, if asked, would often say they meant nothing at all. The loop fills the silence of the medium with the loudest thing it has, its own anxiety. You can read okay as cold, as neutral, as agreement, as the prelude to bad news. All are possible. None can be known from the words. Yet the mind commits to one reading, feels its weight, then flips to another, feels that weight and spins. The message did not change. Your interpretation did, and interpretation is not information. The reset, read the message once for the fact it contains. If a reply is needed, send a plain one. If meaning is genuinely unclear, the only tool that works is a brief, direct question, not 10 internal readings. And if there is nothing to do, there is nothing to do, and the loop about the message is a loop about your tolerance for ambiguity, which is the real thing to practice. Ambiguity is not a problem to solve. It is a condition to inhabit. Chapter 12. When your mind goes to court against you. There is a particular loop where the mind becomes a prosecutor and you are the defendant, and the charge is always the same. You were wrong, careless, foolish, too much, not enough. The evidence is assembled from memory, the verdict is delivered with certainty, and the appeal process is another loop. This court is rigged because it writes the rules as it goes. A normal moment becomes exhibit A. A reasonable choice becomes proof of a flaw. The standard of evidence would never hold in a real courtroom, but inside your head it passes without question, because the prosecutor and the judge are the same voice, and that voice is tired and afraid. Naming the court is the first relief. When you notice the prosecution beginning the listing of your failures, the rehearsal of your embarrassments, you can say, internally, this is the court again. Not I am terrible, but the court is in session. That small shift returns you to the observer seat, where you can ask whether the charges are even fair, which they rarely are. Useful responses. Ask for actual evidence, not feeling. Ask what a kind friend would say about the same moment. Ask whether this charge would hold if it were about someone you loved. Often the case collapses under its own weakness, and you are left not with self-loathing but with a tired, ordinary human moment that needed no trial at all. Chapter 13. Nighttime Mental Noise. Night is when the loops are loudest for a reason. The day's distractions are gone. The tasks are done or deferred. The body is still. Into that quiet the mind sends everything it postponed, the worry, the replay, the what-if, the court. With nothing else to do, you do them for hours, lying down, getting more tired and more awake. The nighttime loop is especially cruel because rest requires release, and release is exactly what overthinking refuses to do. You know you should sleep. Knowing does nothing, because the loop is not a logic problem. It is a habit of attention that activates in the dark, and habits do not yield to instruction. What helps at night is not trying to think your way to calm, but changing the relationship to the thoughts. The mind will offer its loops. You do not have to attend them. Imagine them as announcements on a distant radio, present, audible, not requiring your response. You can lie there tired and let the radio play without getting up to argue with the broadcast. Practical supports matter. A notebook beside the bed to place a looping thought outside your head, a fixed wind down that does not involve screens, and the plain agreement with yourself that the problem will still exist in the morning and will be easier then, because morning you is rested, and the loop loses its midnight exaggeration in daylight. Night thoughts are not wiser. They are only louder. Chapter 14. Turning Thought into Action. The single most reliable exit from a loop is action, because action lives in the world the loop cannot reach. The loop is pure internal motion. A small external step, a sentence sent, a decision made, a boundary stated breaks the circle by introducing something the thinking did not produce: reality. This is not about frantic doing. It is about one concrete move. The loop about the unanswered message ends when you send a plain reply. The loop about the decision ends when you choose and tell one person. The loop about the relationship ends when you ask the actual question. Action is the answer the loop was pretending to search for. The resistance to this is real. Action exposes you to outcome, while looping keeps you safely inside possibility. But possibility is a comfortable prison. The relief of a real answer, even an unwelcome one, is deeper than the comfort of an unresolved maybe, because the unwelcome answer lets you move, and moving is what the loop was preventing. Start small. When caught in a loop, ask, what is one action, however tiny, that this situation actually allows? Not the perfect action, the smallest real one. Often it is a sentence. Do it. The loop, which depended on your total internal participation, loses its subject the moment you act, because you are no longer inside it thinking, you are outside it doing. Chapter 15. What deserves your attention? Attention is the currency of a thinking life, and overthinking spends it on things that pay nothing. Scenarios that won't happen, judgments you can't confirm, pasts you can't change. Meanwhile, the things that do pay, the task in front of you, the person across from you, the choice you can make, wait for a resource that has been spent elsewhere. A useful filter. Does this thought connect to something I can decide or do? If yes, it deserves attention, briefly and aimed at the decision. If no, it is a visitor, and visitors do not get to rearrange the house. You can acknowledge a thought without hosting it. Not every arrival is an obligation. This is not suppression. Suppression is pushing thoughts away, which makes them louder. It is selection, letting the thought exist, noting it, and choosing where your attention goes next. The difference is gentle but absolute. One is a fight, the other is a choice. Choice is available to you even when calm is not. Practicing this filter shrinks the loops over time, because the loops feed on attention. Starve them and they weaken. Not instantly, not perfectly, but measurably. A quieter mind is not one with fewer thoughts. It is one with a better gatekeeper, and you are the only gatekeeper it has. Chapter 16. Learning to leave questions unanswered. The hardest lesson in this book is also the freest. Some questions do not have answers yet, and the attempt to answer them now is the loop itself. Will this work out? Did I handle that right? What do they really think? These may be unanswerable today, and unanswerable questions are not problems to solve. They are weather to wait out. Leaving a question open feels like failure to a mind trained on certainty. But an open question is not a closed case. It is a suspended one. The answer may arrive with time, with information, with a conversation you have not yet had. Closing it prematurely by inventing an answer only creates a false fact you then react to, which is worse than the honest unknown. The practice is tolerance for the unclosed. Notice the question. Note that its answer is not currently available. Decide, gently, that you will revisit it when there is something to know, not before. This is not giving up. It is correctly identifying a door that is not yet open and walking on to the doors that are. Over time, leaving questions unanswered stops feeling like danger and starts feeling like rest. Most of what the mind fights to resolve would have resolved itself given a week and a little distance. You are not abandoning the question. You are letting it ripen, which is the only way some questions ever become answerable. Chapter 17. The Clear Method in Real Life. Here is the method we have been building, gathered into 5 moves you can run in any loop, on any night, about any thought. It is not a ritual. It is a sequence you can hold in memory the way you hold a phone number, retrievable exactly when your thinking is cloudy. See, catch the loop. Notice the moment productive thought becomes repetition. I'm in the loop. That one sentence moves you outside it. L. Label the real question. Name what the mind is actually after. Uncertainty, fear, rejection, control, regret, embarrassment, or a decision. Usually it is not the surface question but one of these underneath. E. Extract what you know. Separate the fact from the story and the prediction. Write the fact alone. Watch how much of the distress was the story, not the event. A. ACT on what you can control. If there is a move, a sentence, a decision, a boundary, make it small and once. Action is the answer the loop was mimicking. R. Release what has no next move. Some questions cannot be answered now. Leave them. An open question is not a failure, it is weather. A few real applications. The replay of an awkward moment, catch. Label embarrassment and the deeper question of tolerating imperfection. Extract the moment happened, it's over. Act if a brief apology is warranted, one line, otherwise none. Release the past has no next move. The silent message, catch. Label need to know, intolerance of ambiguity. Extract a few words were sent, tone is unknown. Act, send a plain reply or ask directly if needed. Release no further move available. The unmade decision, catch. Label fear of wrong choice. Extract both options have trade-offs. Full info arrives after choosing. Act, choose, tell someone. Release the unchosen path. The method is not magic. It is a habit of direction applied to a habit of spinning. Use it badly 100 times and you are still 100 times ahead of the person who waited to feel calm and never moved. The loops will return. They always do. Clear is simply what you do when they do. Chapter 18. Building a QUITER relationship with your mind. The goal was never a silent mind. A mind that never speaks is not the aim. A mind you can direct is. Overthinking is not the presence of thought. It is the absence of choice about where thought goes. The work of this book is to return that choice to you, one loop at a time. A quieter relationship is built the way any relationship is, through repeated, small, honest interactions. Each time you catch instead of spiral, you teach the mind a new default. Each time you release instead of push, you show it that open questions are safe. The brain learns from repetition far more than from insight, so the 100 ordinary moments matter more than the one dramatic realization. Be patient with the old patterns. They were installed over years and will not uninstall in a week. A loop you notice and release after 20 minutes is still a win over a loop you lived inside for 3 hours. Progress here is not the absence of noise. It is the shortening of the time between the loop starting and you noticing it, because noticing is the only true off switch, and you are building the hand that reaches for it. Also, be kind to the mind that loops. It loops because it is trying to keep you safe, using tools that worked in a world that no longer exists. It is not your enemy. It is an old protector using outdated methods. You are not silencing it. You are updating it gently by showing it through your own actions that you are safe enough to let some questions go. The body keeps the score of thought. Before going deeper into the method, it is worth naming something the loop does to the body, because the body is where you will first feel the loop even when the mind tries to hide it. The shoulders rise. The breath shortens. The jaw tightens. The stomach knots. Overthinking is not only a mental event. It is a physical one, and the body often knows before the mind admits it. This is useful because the body is an early alarm. You may not notice the thought, but you will notice the tight chest, and the tight chest can be the cue that sends you looking for the loop. My body is braced. What am I spinning about? The physical signal becomes a helper. a second observer that notices when the mind will not. It also means the reset is partly physical. You cannot think your way out of a body that is braced, but you can meet the body where it is. A slow exhale, the shoulders dropped, the feet felt on the floor. These are not magic. They are a signal to the oldest part of you that says, in the only language it reads, that you are not in danger right now. The loop feeds on the sense of danger. Lowering the body's alarm lowers the loop's fuel. None of this is medical advice, and if the physical symptoms are frequent, intense, or frightening, that is exactly the kind of thing to bring to a professional. The point here is modest. The loop lives in the body too, and the body can be both an early warning and a small, legitimate way back to the present, where the loop has no ground to stand on. The stories we tell about ourselves. A special kind of overthinking is autobiographical. Not the replay of a moment, but the story about who you are. I am someone who handles things badly. I am too sensitive. I always ruin good things. These are not single loops. They are looping conclusions, repeated so often they feel like identity, and identity is the hardest thing to question because it feels like fact. But I am someone who is a story, not a measurement. It was built from a few moments, generalized into a permanent trait, and then used to interpret every new moment in its image. The mind confirms the story by noticing what fits and ignoring what contradicts it, a quiet bias that keeps the autobiography stable and the person small. The reset is not to declare the opposite story, that is just another loop. It is to notice the story as a story and to ask for evidence both ways. You will usually find moments that contradict the harsh autobiography, and those moments are not exceptions to who you are. They are also who you are. The truth is that a person is a wide, changing thing, and the single-line autobiography is a cartoon of it. When the self-story loops, catch it. Label it, usually shame or fear wearing the mask of insight. Extract the few actual events from the vast interpretation built on them. Act, if useful, by treating yourself as you would a friend in the same moment. Release the global verdict, which was never a fact and never will be. Overthinking AT work. The workplace is a greenhouse for loops because it combines uncertainty, evaluation, and other people's judgments, the three ingredients overthinking loves. A presentation is over-rehearsed until the rehearsal becomes its own anxiety. An email is rewritten 9 times and still feels wrong. A meeting is replayed for signs of failure. What makes work loops stubborn is the belief that more thinking equals better work. Sometimes true, briefly. Often false, because beyond a point, more thinking about the task is thinking about yourself doing the task, and that loop produces fear, not quality. The 10th draft is usually worse than the 3rd, because the 3rd was clear and the 10th is afraid. The reset at work is practical. Set a limit. This email gets 2 passes, then it goes. This decision gets 20 minutes, then it is made. External constraints beat internal willpower because the loop will negotiate with your willpower all day and win. A timer does not negotiate. Use the smallest version of clear. Catch the over-revision, label the fear beneath it, extract the fact that the work is reasonable, act by sending or deciding, release the fantasy of the perfect version. Also worth naming, most colleagues are thinking about themselves, not you. The imaginary audience scrutinizing your every word is largely imaginary. The real audience is busy, kind, and forgetful, which is a relief, and also a reason to stop polishing for them. Overthinking and social media. A word about the machine in your pocket, because it is the most efficient loop generator ever built. You post something and refresh to read the silence. You read a comment and build a narrative about the commenter. You compare your unseen interior to someone's curated exterior and conclude you are behind. None of this is thinking. It is engagement optimized for your attention, and your attention is exactly what the loop feeds on. The platform does not care that you are looping. It is designed to keep you there because your presence is its product. Knowing this is not cynicism. It is freedom. When you catch the social loop, remember that the discomfort you feel was engineered to be felt, and that stepping away is not missing out. It is reclaiming the attention the machine was spending for you. Practical move: remove the refresh. Close the app. The loop about the post cannot continue if you are not feeding it the silence to interpret. The post will be whatever it is whether you refresh 40 times or none. The 40 refreshes are the loop, not the post. Release them and the post becomes just a post, a small thing in a large life, not a verdict on your worth. The difference between reflection and replay. One distinction deserves its own space, because confusing the two is how people end up either never examining anything or examining everything. Reflection is brief, aimed, and ends. Replay is long, circular, and never lands. Both involve looking back. Only one moves forward. Reflection asks, "What can I learn from that?" It answers briefly and stops. Replay asks, "What did it mean? What did they think? How badly did I do?" and answers with more questions. If you cannot tell which you are doing, use a timer. Genuine reflection usually finishes in minutes. If you are still at it after 20, you are almost certainly replaying, and the timer is your honest friend telling you so. Healthy reflection is a tool you pick up and put down. The loop is a tool that picked you up and will not put you down. The difference is who is holding whom. Clear returns the tool to your hand. Catch the backward gaze, label whether it seeks learning or reassurance, extract the one thing worth keeping, act if there is anything to change, release the rest. Do not swear off looking back. Looking back honestly is how you grow. Just make sure you are the one doing the looking, and that you close the book when the looking is done, instead of sleeping with it open under your pillow. When the loop is trying to tell you something. Not every loop is meaningless. Some loops contain a real signal buried under the noise. A decision you keep avoiding because it is actually important. A relationship you keep analyzing because something in it genuinely needs attention. A fear you keep spinning because it points at a change you have not allowed yourself to make. The skill is separating the signal from the spin. A loop that resolves into an action is usually signal. You keep thinking about the conversation because you should have it. A loop that resolves into only more thinking is usually spin. You keep thinking about the conversation because thinking about having it feels safer than having it. Same subject, different engine. Listen for the actionable core. If under the loop there is one concrete thing you could do, do it, and notice how much of the loop evaporates once the thing is done. The loop was a messenger with a package, and you were refusing to take the package. Take it, open it, act on it, and the messenger leaves. Most loops are terrible messengers, but they are sometimes the only ones you have, so do not dismiss all of them, sort them. The danger is using, it might be a signal, as an excuse to spin forever. A signal becomes clear quickly, or it isn't a signal, it's a story. Give the loop a short audition. If it produces an action within a few minutes, honor it. If it only produces more loop, it is spin, and spin gets released. The practice of returning. A quieter mind is not built in a single insight. It is built in the returning, the 100 small moments of noticing and coming back, returning from the replay to the room, returning from the what-if to the task, returning from the court to the present. Each return is short, and each one teaches. Treat returning as the practice, not the perfect absence of loops. You will leave 1,000 times. The skill is coming back and coming back sooner each time. The first return might take an hour. Later ones take 10 minutes. Later still 2. The measure of progress is not silence. It is the shortening gap between leaving and returning, because that gap is where your life is actually lived. This is why patience matters. The loops were installed by years of practice. They will not uninstall in a weekend. But every return is a tiny uninstallation, a small proof to the brain that you are the one holding the attention, not the loop. Over months, those proofs accumulate into a different default, and the loud mind becomes a manageable one, present, sometimes noisy, no longer in charge. Be especially gentle in the first weeks. The loop will feel urgent and the return will feel weak. That is the old habit protesting its replacement. Keep returning anyway. The weakness is only newness. Newness becomes strength with repetition, and repetition is the one thing you already know how to do because you have been repeating the loop all along. A note on when to seek help. This audiobook is a practical companion for everyday overthinking. It is not, and does not pretend to be, treatment for conditions where thinking becomes a symptom of something deeper, persistent low mood, anxiety that restricts your life, intrusive thoughts that frighten you, trauma that has not been met. Those deserve care from people trained to give it, and seeking that care is a form of clarity, not a failure of it. A rough guide. If the loops are constant, distressing, and unaffected by the tools here, if they accompany changes in sleep, appetite, or functioning, if they include thoughts of self-harm, please talk to a professional. Using clear to manage a difficult afternoon is reasonable. Using it to avoid reaching for help you need is not. The method is a support, not a substitute, and knowing the difference is part of taking back control of your mind in the truest sense. There is no shame in the heavier weather. Many capable, thoughtful people move through it, and many find real relief with the right support. Reaching out is not the opposite of self-mastery. Often it is the first real act of it. Real moments, real LOOPS. Theory is easy to agree with. Life is where the loop lives. A set of composite scenes, drawn from the ordinary texture of a week, not from any one person. The text 18 midnight. A woman reads a message from a friend. Can we talk tomorrow? She reads it 7 times. Each reading finds a new tone. The first was neutral, the third was ominous. The fifth was a prelude to bad news. She does not sleep. In the morning, the friend says she simply wanted to check in because she had been busy and missed her. The 7 readings produced a catastrophe that never existed. The reset, read once for the fact. A talk is requested. That is all the fact contains. If meaning is unclear, one direct question ends the loop. 7 silent readings never will. The career crossroads. A man has 2 job offers. Both are good. He cannot choose because choosing means the other might have been better, and the better one cannot be known until he is inside it, which is after choosing. He researches for weeks, building spreadsheets of hypotheticals. The loop is not carefulness. It is fear of regret wearing the mask of analysis. The reset. Decide with what he knows, accept that some regret is possible, tell one person and close the spreadsheet. Either job was fine. The only real error was the week spent not choosing. The embarrassment replay. A person said something slightly off in a meeting days ago. Noted, moved on by everyone there, not by him. He replays the sentence, winces, imagines the faces. The meeting is over, only his private reliving continues, charging him twice for one moment. The reset, catch, label embarrassment and the deeper question of tolerating imperfection. Extract, it happened, it is over, no one else is thinking about it. Act, if a brief, light acknowledgement is warranted, 1 sentence, otherwise none. Release, the past has no next move. The DELAYED reply. Someone sends a message and the reply is slow. The mind builds a narrative. Something is wrong, they are upset, the relationship is shifting. None of it is known. The delay has 100 innocent explanations, a busy day, a dead phone, a forgotten tab. The loop treats the unknown as a verdict. The reset, extract the fact, a reply is delayed. Label the real question, intolerance of ambiguity, fear of rejection. Release, because no action is available and the answer, if it arrives, will be ordinary. The 2-hour decision. A person spends 2 hours researching a purchase that could have been made in 10 minutes. More information was sought as if it would remove risk, but risk was never removable, it was only nameable. The extra 100 minutes bought anxiety, not safety. The reset, set a time limit before researching. When it ends, decide. The 10th source rarely changes the answer the 2nd source gave, it only extends the loop. The rehearsed tomorrow. Someone lies in bed mentally rehearsing a conversation they will have tomorrow. They play it perfectly, then badly, then perfectly. None of the rehearsals are the conversation, which has not happened and will not follow the script. The reset. Notice the rehearsal is a loop about a future you cannot control yet. Catch it. Release it, with the agreement that tomorrow you will be more capable of it, rested than you are now anxious. The loop about the loop. A subtle trap appears once you start practicing. You begin to overthink your overthinking. Am I looping? Is this reflection or replay? Should I be using clear right now? The meta loop is still a loop, and it is especially stubborn because it feels like progress. You are, after all, thinking about your thinking, which feels wise. The cure is lightness. The method is a tool, not a new standard you must meet perfectly. If you are asking whether you are looping, you are probably looping about looping, and the answer is, stop measuring, return to the room. You do not need to apply clear to every thought. You need to use it when a loop is costing you something, and the rest of the time live. Perfectionism about the practice is just the old habit in a new outfit. The goal was never to think correctly about everything. It was to suffer less from thought that goes nowhere. If the method is reducing your suffering, it is working, even if you apply it clumsily, late, or not at all some days. The clumsy use of a tool still moves you. The perfect avoidance of one moves you nowhere. Overthinking and the people you love. The loops about loved ones are the hardest to release because caring is the loop's fuel. A parent overthinks a child's silence. A partner overthinks a tone. A friend overthinks a distance. The feeling underneath is love, and love makes the unknown feel dangerous because the person matters. But love is not served by private reconstruction. The son's silence might mean nothing. The partner's tone might be fatigue. The loop assumes the worst in the name of caring, but assuming the worst is not caring, it is fear wearing caring's clothes. Real care acts. It asks gently. It offers presence. It states, I felt something off, are you okay? And then lets the actual person answer instead of the version built in your head. The practice with loved ones is the same, clear with extra tenderness. Catch the loop about them. Label the fear beneath the care. Extract the fact from the story you told. Act with one honest, vulnerable step. Release the rest, trusting that the relationship can hold a little uncertainty, because the strongest relationships are not the ones without questions. They are the ones where questions can be asked out loud. The quiet benefit nobody mentions. People come to this work wanting silence. They leave with something better, though it takes time to notice. Not a silent mind, that is not the aim and not even desirable. A mind you can direct. And with that, a peculiar byproduct, more energy. The loops were expensive. You did not know how expensive until the bills stopped arriving. Think of the attention you spent on the rehearsed tomorrow, the replayed yesterday, the analyzed silence. All of it is now available for the task, the walk, the conversation, the rest. People often report, weeks in, that they are less tired not because they sleep more, but because they stopped running loops in the background, which is a kind of labor they had mistaken for rest. This is the quiet benefit. Overthinking was not only painful, it was draining, and you had accepted the drain as the cost of being a thoughtful person. You are thoughtful. Thoughtfulness does not require the loop. Releasing the loop returns the energy the loop was spending, and that energy, given to your actual life, is its own reward, more reliable than any calm the loop promised and never delivered. What to do tonight? If you take one thing from this book, let it be a single habit small enough to start tonight. When a loop arrives and one will, do not fight it and do not obey it. Notice it. Say internally, I'm in the loop. Then ask the only question that matters. Is there something I can actually do right now? If yes, do the smallest version. If no, let the question hang open like a coat on a hook and return to the room. That is the whole practice in 2 sentences. Catch, ask, act, or release. You will forget it tonight and remember it tomorrow and forget it again. That is fine. The forgetting is not failure. The returning is the practice, and you are now someone who knows how to return, which is different from someone who never left. The book ends where it began, with the conversation that ended hours ago. It is still over. The only place it continues is the room you built for it, and you can leave that room whenever you decide the thought does not get the floor. You were never required to attend every thought. You just forgot you had the choice. Now you remember. The anatomy of a single loop. To make the method concrete, watch one loop from the inside moment by moment, the way you might watch weather form. A person finishes a call with a client. The client's tone was neutral, maybe a touch cool. The mind notices the coolness. A question forms, was she unhappy? That question feels urgent. The mind searches the call for evidence. It finds a pause. The pause is interpreted as disapproval. Disapproval becomes a story. The account is at risk. The story becomes a prediction. She will pull the work. The prediction becomes a feeling, dread. The dread sends the mind back to the call to find more evidence, and the loop closes. Where did productive thought end and the loop begin? At the question, was she unhappy? That question had an answer the person did not have and could not get by thinking. Everything after it, the pause as disapproval, the account at risk, the work pulled, was story and prediction built on a single neutral tone. None of it was a fact. The loop was not uncovering a problem. It was manufacturing one from a tone it could not interpret. Because tone over a call is exactly the kind of thing that cannot be interpreted reliably. Run clear on it. Catch, the mind is circling, not arriving. Label uncertainty about another's judgment, fear of loss. Extract, the client's tone was neutral to cool, the rest is invented. Act, if warranted, a single brief check-in message, otherwise none. Release, the answer about her judgment is not currently available and will be clearer with time or her next message. The loop, met this way, loses its subject because the subject was never the client. It was the person's tolerance for not knowing, and that can be practiced directly without the client's cooperation. The delayed reply, revisited. The slow reply deserves a second look because it is the most common loop and the easiest to dismiss as trivial, which is exactly why it does so much quiet damage. A reply that takes hours becomes, in the looping mind, evidence of distance, disapproval, or ending. The same person who would shrug at a friend's silence in person builds a small tragedy from it in text, because text removes the human context that would otherwise say, "She's just busy." The loop about the reply is almost never about the reply. It is about whether you are acceptable, and that question is too big to be answered by a notification. So the mind uses the notification as a stand-in, investing it with a weight it cannot carry. The reply arrives, is ordinary, and the relief is brief, because the underlying question was never about the reply. It was about you, and you will loop again at the next silence. The durable reset is not about this reply. It is about building tolerance for the unknown status of other people, which is the permanent condition of having relationships. You will never know in real time what everyone thinks. Practicing release on the small silences trains the muscle you need for the larger ones, and over time the slow reply becomes just a slow reply, a fact, not a verdict, not a story, not a forecast of loss. Overthinking and creative work. The creative person knows a special paralysis, the blank page met with a mind that will not stop evaluating its own first move. The writer rewrites the first sentence 10 times. The musician critiques the first note. The idea is abandoned not because it is bad but because it was judged before it could become good, and judgment applied too early is a loop, not craft. The loop here hides behind the word quality. But quality at the start is impossible. Quality is what revision finds, and revision requires a thing to revise, and the thing requires a first bad draft that the loop will not allow. The perfectionist is not protecting quality. They are avoiding the vulnerability of a bad beginning, and avoidance, rehearsed, becomes a life of unfinished things. The reset for creation, separate producing from evaluating and do them at different times. Produce badly on purpose, the worse the better because a bad draft exists and a blank page does not. Then, later, evaluate. The loop conflates the two, evaluating while producing, which produces paralysis. Catch the evaluation arriving during creation. Label it as fear of the bad beginning. Extract that no first draft was ever good. ACT by writing the worst version. Release the inner critic until the draft exists to receive it. Overthinking and exercise or health. Health is a loop magnet because the body offers endless data to interpret and the stakes feel high. A twinge becomes a catastrophe. A missed workout becomes evidence of failure. A food choice becomes a month undone. The mind, anxious about the body, turns every signal into a story, and the story is almost always worse than the signal. Worse, the health loop can become a control ritual, tracking, researching, re-researching, that feels like care but is actually anxiety wearing care's clothes. The person is not managing health. They are managing the feeling of uncertainty about health, and that feeling cannot be managed away by more data. More data just feeds the loop that more data will soothe it, which it never does. The reset: get facts from a source that can actually provide them, a clinician, not a forum. Extract the fact from the story. Act on the concrete, reasonable step. Release the forecast. A body is a changing, sometimes unclear thing, and living in a body means tolerating some unknown about it, the way you tolerate the unknown about everything you care about. The loop about health is usually a loop about control, and the body, like the future, is only partly yours. The myth of the perfect decision. A quiet belief runs under much overthinking that a perfect decision exists, and finding it is a matter of enough thought. This belief is the engine of paralysis because it turns every choice into a search for a treasure that is not buried anywhere. There is no perfect decision. There are decent decisions, some luck, and the person's handling of the outcome. The search for perfect feels responsible, but it is often a way to avoid the vulnerability of choosing. A choice exposes you to result. The perfect decision story lets you stay in the safe space of considering, where no result can touch you indefinitely. The cost is a life deferred, the trip not taken, the word not said, the change not made, all in service of a certainty that was never coming. Freeing yourself from this myth is not lowering your standards. It is aiming them correctly. The standard is not the choice with no possible regret. It is the reasonable choice made with what I know, handled well afterward. That standard is achievable, and achievable is better than perfect, because perfect does not exist and achievable gets lived. The person who chooses reasonably and recovers from the occasional error builds a life. The person who waits for perfect builds a pile of unmade choices. The mind as a helpful but loud roommate. A metaphor that helps some people. Your mind is a roommate. Bright, energetic, sometimes right, often anxious and very loud at night. You do not hate the roommate. You do not obey the roommate. You share the apartment and you are the one who pays the rent, which means you get the final say on what the two of you do next. The roommate shouts a worry. You hear it. You do not have to drop everything and investigate. Noted, you say, and return to the dish, the book, the sleep. The roommate learns slowly that shouting does not always get a response and shouts less. That is the relationship you are building, not a silenced mind, but a mind that has learned its alarms are not all emergencies, because you, the one who pays the rent, decided which ones are. This framing diffuses the self-loathing that often rides along with overthinking. You are not broken because your mind is loud. You share space with a loud, ancient, well-meaning protector who was trained for a world of predators and has not updated its training. You can be fond of the roommate and still not attend every complaint. Affection and boundaries are not opposites. They are how you live with anyone, including yourself. The long view of a quieter mind. If you could see yourself a year from now practicing this, you would notice something the daily view hides. The loops did not vanish, but they shrank in authority. The same thought arrives, the replay, the what if, and where it once commanded the evening, it now gets a shrug and a return to the room. Not because you became a calmer person, because you practiced the return so often it became the default. The year is made of these small returns, not of a single transformation. The person who starts this work wanting silence gets, instead, sovereignty, the quiet knowledge that the thought does not get the floor unless they grant it. Sovereignty is better than silence because silence can be broken, and sovereignty cannot be, once it is yours. So be in no hurry. The loops will come tomorrow and the next day, and you will meet them with a tool you did not have before. Some days you will forget the tool and live in the loop, And that day still counts because the next morning you will remember, and remembering is the whole practice. You were never broken. You were only unaware that you held the choice. Now you hold it, and holding it, even clumsily, is the reset. The loop about the past that will not stay past. Some loops are not about the future or other people, but about moments already lived, the apology not given, the chance not taken, the words said in anger years ago. The mind returns to these not to learn but to relive, as if revisiting could alter them, which it cannot, and the impossibility of alteration is exactly why the loop never closes. The past loop is the cruelest because it offers the most certain futility while feeling the most necessary. If I understand it fully, I'll be free of it. But understanding a closed door does not open it. The freedom comes not from understanding the past, but from releasing the attempt to revise it, which is a different action entirely, an action taken in the present, not the past. Clear on the past, catch the return. Label usually regret or a story about your own inadequacy. Extract the fact it happened from the meaning you layered on it, what it proves about you. Act if a real amends is possible and wanted, briefly and once, otherwise none. Release because the past has no next move, and the version of you that acted then was smaller and less equipped than the one reading this now. Forgive that smaller self the way you would forgive anyone who did their best with what they had. This is not forgetting, it is filing. The memory can stay in the archive without being open on your desk. A quieter mind is not one without a past. It is one where the past is referenced, not relived, consulted, not inhabited. Overthinking in families. Family loops are their own species because families carry history. A parent's offhand comment becomes, in the looping mind, confirmation of a lifelong narrative about being the disappointing child. A sibling's silence becomes evidence of old rivalry reignited. The family story, once written, gets every new moment read in its ink, and the loop is really about the story, not the moment. What helps is noticing the old story running under the new moment. The comment may have been nothing, the silence may have been fatigue, but the loop reaches for the family narrative because that narrative is familiar and, paradoxically, safe. Better to know you are the disappointing child than to sit with the uncertainty of a parent you cannot fully read. The certainty, even when painful, is preferable to the unknown, and the loop chooses it. The reset is to meet the actual person in the actual moment, not the character in the family script. Catch the script running. Label the old story beneath it. Extract this moment's fact from the lifetime interpretation. Act with one honest, present response. Release the script's verdict, which was written long before this moment and has no special authority over it. Families are hard because they are old. They are also changeable, one honest present moment at a time. The comparison loop. A modern loop, barely imaginable a generation ago, the comparison spiral. You see a curated life, the achievement, the ease, the beauty, and compare your unseen interior to their exterior. The loop concludes you are behind, lacking, late. It feels like observation but is invention because you are comparing your full, messy inner life to a highlight reel someone edited. The comparison loop is especially empty because it compares two things that cannot be compared. Your behind the scenes to their final cut. No one's life is their feed. The loop knows this and ignores it because the feeling of lacking is more compelling than the fact of curation. The dread is the point, not the comparison. The comparison is just the current costume the dread wears. Reset. When the comparison arrives, extract the fact, someone shared a good moment from the story, therefore my life is lacking. Label the real question, am I enough, am I behind? Act, if useful, by limiting the feed that feeds it, not as punishment but as hygiene, the way you would step out of a room that made you unwell. Release the comparison, which was never a measurement, only a feeling wearing the clothes of one. The loop that hides in productivity. A subtle form of overthinking disguises itself as getting things done. The person reorganizes their tasks, reprioritizes their list, reconsiders their system, and calls it productivity, while the actual task sits untouched. The system becomes a loop, polished endlessly to avoid the vulnerable act of starting the work. This is why some very productive people accomplish little. They manage their management. The loop feels responsible because it looks like planning, but planning that never ends is avoidance in a suit. The real task waits, and the loop about the task grows, because the longer the real task is delayed, the more intimidating it becomes, and the more the system loop feels necessary to calm the dread it helped create. The cure is crude and effective. Do the smallest real version of the actual task before touching any system. One sentence of the report, one dish, one rep. The system can wait. Action on the real thing collapses the loop faster than any reorganization because the loop was never about the system. It was about the dread of beginning, and beginning is the only thing that ends dread. A gentle word on self-compassion. Everything in this book could be misread as one more demand. Now you must control your mind, and if you loop, you are failing at that too. That misreading would be the cruelest loop of all, overthinking your overthinking judged. So a direct word. The aim is less suffering, not perfect mental hygiene. Self-compassion is not a soft extra. It is the lubricant of the whole practice. The harsh inner voice that prosecutes your loops is itself a loop, and meeting it with more harshness only feeds it. Meeting it with a little kindness, this is hard and I'm practicing, does what harshness cannot. It lowers the body's alarm, which lowers the loop's fuel, which makes returning easier. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are a person with a powerful, ancient, sometimes noisy mind, learning a new habit in the only place habits can be learned slowly, imperfectly, repeatedly. The person who loops and meets it kindly is doing better than the person who loops and meets it with contempt. Progress is not the absence of the loop. It is the presence of kindness when the loop arrives. What nobody tells you about the quiet. When the loops finally lose their grip, people expect peace and are surprised to find something else first. A strange emptiness, a moment of what now? The mind, long occupied by its loops, suddenly has open space. An open space for a mind trained on noise can feel like absence rather than relief. This is normal and temporary. The emptiness is the silence after a long noise, and like the silence after a siren, it feels wrong only because you are not used to it. Fill it, at first, with something simple and sensory, a walk, a task, a conversation, a breath. Not to avoid the quiet, but to inhabit it gently, the way you would wade into cool water rather than dive. Over time, the quiet stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like room. Room to think when thinking helps. Room to act. Room to simply be, which the looping mind never had because it was always elsewhere, rehearsing a future or reliving a past. The quiet is not emptiness. It is the present, returned to you, and the present, it turns out, was where your life was all along. The door was never locked. The final thing to know is also the first. You were never trapped. The loop felt like a cage because it occupied all of your attention, and attention is the only place a cage can exist. Step your attention out, and the bars were never there, only a habit repeating that you mistook for a wall. You do not need to defeat the loop. You need to stop attending it. That is a smaller, kinder, achievable thing, and it is the whole reset. The thoughts will come. They always do. You just do not have to greet them at the door, and the relief of that, discovered 100 times in small returns, is the quiet freedom this book points toward. Catch, label, extract, act, release. 5 moves held in memory like a phone number available at midnight on any thought about anything. You were never broken. You were only unaware you held the choice. Now you hold it. Use it clumsily, use it late, use it imperfectly, but use it, and the looping mind becomes a manageable one, and the manageable mind becomes a life you are actually living, instead of one you are endlessly reviewing from the sidelines. The 30-day reset. The method becomes a habit through repetition in low-stakes moments. This is a simple plan, not 30 mini-chapters. 4 weeks, 1 theme each. You are not aiming for perfection. You are aiming for practice, because practice is the only thing that changes a default. Week 1 catch. Only noticing. All week practice catching a loop, any loop in cold, the replay, the what if, the text reread. When you catch one, say internally, I'm in the loop. Do not fix it. Do not analyze why, just name it. If you catch 3 a day and name them, the week worked. Naming is the foundation, everything else rests on it. Week 2, label and extract. Add the next 2 moves. When caught, ask what the mind is actually after: uncertainty, fear, rejection, control, regret. Then separate the fact from the story. She was silent for 6 hours is the fact. Everything after it is the story. Practice holding just the fact, even for a minute. This week builds the muscle that shrinks the drama to its actual size. Week 3 ACT. Add action. When a loop has a move, make the smallest real one: a sentence sent, a decision made, a question asked once. Notice how much of the loop evaporates the moment you act, because the loop depended on your total internal participation, and action removes you from it. This week teaches that the answer was usually in the world, not the head. Week 4 release. Add the hardest, freest move. When a loop has no next move, leave it open. Practice tolerating the unanswered question, the unknown status, the past that cannot change. Let the coat hang on the hook. This week builds the quiet freedom the whole book points toward. You do not have to attend every thought. After 30 days, do not stop. The practice becomes maintenance. The person who finishes is not the person who started. They have a tool where there was once only a cage, and the tool, used clumsily, still moves them. Keep using it and the loops lose their authority, one small return at a time. Real moments, more loops. A few more scenes, because the method lives in specificity, and the specific is where recognition happens. The overprepared presentation. A person rehearses a talk until the rehearsal is its own anxiety. They know it perfectly and fear it perfectly. The extra rehearsal was not preparation, it was the loop about being judged, dressed as diligence. The reset: rehearse once, briefly, then stop. The talk will be what it is, and over-rehearsing trades calm for a fragile perfection that cracks under a real audience anyway. Catch the extra round. Label the fear of judgment. Extract that one rehearsal was enough. Act by closing the laptop. Release the fantasy of the flawless delivery. The apology never sent. Someone wronged a friend years ago and replays it, feeling terrible but never reaches out because reaching out feels harder than reliving. The loop substitutes feeling bad for doing better, and feeling bad while it lasts feels like amends, but it is not amends. It is a private penance that changes nothing for the friend. The reset. If a real, brief amends is possible and wanted, send it once plainly. If it is not possible, extract the fact from the meaning and release the penance loop, which was never the same as repair. The group chat. A message lands in a group and the person reads their own contribution 10 times, certain it sounded wrong. The group has moved on, only they are still in the moment. The reset. The group's silence about your line is not judgment, it is the group being a group, busy and forgetful. Catch the reread. Label the fear of looking foolish. Extract that the line was ordinary. Release because the group is not thinking about it and you need not either. The big decision postponed. A person delays ending a situation that does not work, a lease, a role, a relationship dynamic, because leaving means admitting the time spent was partly wasted. The loop about whether to stay is really a loop about whether they can tolerate that admission. The reset. Catch. Label fear of regret of wasted time. Extract that the time is spent regardless, only the future is adjustable. Act by making the one decision and one small first step. Release the sunk past, which cannot be recovered by staying. The quiet proof. You will know the practice is working not by silence but by a small, private sign. The loop starts, and instead of being swept into it, you feel a tiny step back. Oh, this again, and a return to the room. That step back is the whole victory, and at first it comes late, after an hour. Later it comes sooner. One day it comes in the first minute, and you realize the cage was never locked, only inhabited. Do not wait for a dramatic moment of arrival. There is none. There is only the accumulation of small returns, and one day you notice the returns outnumber the loops, and the loops, though present, no longer run the day. That is the quiet proof, not a transformed mind, but a reclaimed one, where attention goes by choice and the thoughts, though they come, no longer get the floor unless you grant it. The work was never to think less. It was to think on purpose, to let the useful thought arrive and move, and the useless one arrive and pass without your attendance. You were always capable of this. You had simply forgotten you held the choice, and forgetting, as you now know, is not the end. It is only where the remembering begins. A closing invitation. You began this audiobook perhaps at night with a loop running, the same kind you have run 1,000 times, the conversation, the what if, the silence read 10 ways. You are still capable of running it. The difference now is not that the loop is gone. It is that you know it is a loop, and knowing that, you have a move. The clear method is offered free because it costs nothing but the small motion of using it. Catch the loop. Label the real question. Extract what you know. Act on what you can control. Release what has no next move. 5 moves, repeatable, yours to use the next time the feeling is loud and the thought goes in circles. The person who sent the message, replayed the moment, feared the choice. They are not broken. They are practiced at a habit that served a younger self and now exhausts the current one. That habit can be met, not with contempt, but with a simple, repeatable move. The thoughts will come. They always do. You just do not have to attend every one. Leave some at the door. Go live. Final chapter. You don't have to attend every thought. There is a moment, familiar by now, when the thought arises, the replay, the what if, the court, the message read 10 ways, and the old reflex is to attend it, to sit up mentally and give it the floor. This book has been an argument that the floor is yours to grant or withhold, and that most thoughts do not deserve it. You do not have to attend every thought. That is the whole reset said plainly. A thought arrives. It is not a summons. It is a visitor. You can hear it at the door, decide it is not here to see you today, and let it stand there while you go back to your life. The visiting thought does not get louder by being ignored. It gets quieter, because attention was the only thing keeping it alive. The mind will object. It will say this thought is urgent, this one matters, this one is different. They all say that. The urgency is the costume, not the contents. You can acknowledge the costume and still not open the door, and in that small refusal is the entire freedom this audiobook points toward. Not a quieter mind, but a mind you no longer obey without question. Remember the conversation that ended 3 hours ago. It is still over. The only place it continues is the room you built for it in your head, and you can leave that room. Not by forcing the thought away that only invites it back, but by noticing it, naming it, and gently returning your attention to the world where your hands actually are. Catch, label, extract, act, release. The method is the door out, and the door was never locked. You were never broken. You were practiced at a habit that served a younger you and now exhausts the current one. That habit can be met, not with self-loathing, but with a simple, repeatable move. The thoughts will come. They always do. You just do not have to attend every one. Leave some at the door. Go live.